They actually sometimes use gold and silver wire to cover an entire object, sort of like plating by just putting the wires close enough together that when they get smashed down, they overlap. So that's Kuftgari. Hi, Dan Tokar here at the Willow Forge in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. I'm going to demonstrate an inlay technique known as Kuftgari, which is used in a lot of the Arab world, North Africa, the Middle East, India, some parts of the rest of Asia. But you start off with a relatively soft piece of steel, iron, and you file it so that it's smooth and relatively clean. So you can see the metal. All right. Then you take a little thin cold chisel and a light hammer, and you hold the edge of the chisel so that it's just floating above the surface of the steel. And you walk the chisel along as you strike. And because the chisel is not wide enough, I have to make several lines of these parallel chisel cuts. And you want to cover the whole surface that you're going to decorate with these parallel chisel cuts. Now all of those are pointing in that direction, so I'm going to reorient and now make chisel cuts where the chisel is held at a different angle. And go over the same area again. And you'll see you end up with a texture that looks a lot like a file. So I've got a cross hatching there. Lots of tooth, as they would say. And to even make it a little finer, I'm going to go at a third direction. You see that little patch now has got 3 sets of cuts. Now, I've got copper wire and brass wire that are both annealed. And what I'm going to do, now I'm going to take some brass wire that's annealed, a slightly heavier hammer. I'm going to take the wire and lay it where I want it. Tap it down with the hammer. And then I'm going to cut it off with my chisel. Now that is just sitting there very lightly attached. I've just tapped it enough to hold it in place. Now if I want to make designs or lettering, I can use my little chain nose pliers here and say that I want to make some little scrolls. I can make my little my little scrolls here. See if I can do that. Oops. So, you can see I've done a little scroll, and I can take my little diagonal cutters, cut that little piece of wire loose, and put it right down there. And then I take my hammer, and you can see how it's flattened a little bit and it's stuck well enough. Now that the train is passed, I can say that that little scroll is stuck well enough. And if I want to add something else here, I could take some copper wire, a little heavier copper wire, and make another little design. I'm going to just make a circle. I'll cut that off. And I'm going to add that right there. And you see that's a heavier gauge wire, so it's thicker. And one of the things that happens is that this wire gets flattened out and gets to be 2 to 3 times bigger than it is as wire. You see, that's now stuck well enough to hold it. Now I take this out of the vise, and I'll show you what the layout looks like. Just stuck to the surface like that. And you take it over to the anvil, and you use a heavy hammer, and you strike all of that down till it's smooth. And you'll see that that's a smooth surface now. All the wire's been smushed down. Alright, it's a little hard to see the contrast here. So what I'm going to do is brighten this whole thing up by sanding a little bit on it and then heat bluing it. I've got some 240 grit sandpaper. And shining up the copper and the brass and the iron. Not too much. And there you can see that. Now I'm going to take it over to the torch and warm it up. Hey! I've heated it up until it's turned blue. I'm going to cool it off in some water. And there's the inlay. Now you'll notice the fine cross-hatched lines in the steel. Those are your original chisel cuts, which are now smooth because you hammered them down. And they had the copper and the brass pounded into them and kind of keyed in and locked so that when they got flattened, they actually grabbed into the backside of that wire. And as I said, the wire has been flattened 2 or 3 times its original thickness. So you have to leave enough room in your design so that when the wire expands. Now, in some cases, they actually use this with gold and silver wire to actually cover an entire sword pommel. They actually sometimes use gold and silver wire to cover an entire object, sort of like plating by just putting the wires close enough together that when they get smashed down, they overlap. So that's Kuftgari. Bye.